Hi everyone, back again. This is an addendum to the first introductory video on highly attuned, multisensory, empathic people, the temperament, the wiring, which we have both neural and genetic research on, decades worth of it, as well as now the new theory coming through also, because we've all heard the word trauma, that this particular type of exquisite attunement can come out of trauma as well, because we have to be exquisitely aware when we're in very dysfunctional and abusive situations growing up. So my sense is it can be both, but that's for you to decide as you explore your own life and how you came to be as you are. So in terms of the actual research that's saying, hey, this is innately a part of who we are, it is saying we have this depth of perceptual processing, which, as I've explained in the previous video, we are receiving a lot of data from our external environment, which is a head spin and a body spin when we're little and we don't have that guidance. It's really tough. Picking up on the depression of your father or the repressed frustration of your mother. And then we get to interpret it, our little system, our little brain, without the experience and wealth of knowledge of, being a human, we can blame ourselves and think it's somehow our fault and then adapt into these maladaptive strategies that are adaptive then and save your butt, but in actual fact become maladaptive in your older adult years, and they tend to sabotage the things that we want in life and our relationships, etc. So this depth of perceptual processing is really picking up on other people's thoughts, feelings, sensations, could be symptoms, could be illnesses, okay? We could be picking up on group, collective energy and patterns. You might be sensing how it feels over in the United States right now, post-election, okay? You might be feeling globally what's going on in particular areas of the world. You get a wave of something come through you and you check the news and you go, whoa, okay, I can see what's actually happening here, because this flood or wave of overwhelming emotion or sensation through my body, there's no reason for it to be here, but it's hit me like a ton of bricks. There's nothing to trigger it in my personal life, so it's probably not yours. We don't necessarily have to even find the cause of it, but just to know that I'm picking up on more than what's just my own psychology. It's really important for you to understand that. It takes the pressure off. We stop beating ourselves up. We stop thinking that we're crazy. So that's how we work. It's challenging. And we don't want to fall into a collapsed version of ourselves as a result, because we're empathically overwhelmed. There's too much coming in, too much data, too much overwhelm. And so what I have seen with empathic people, the empathic temperament, is that we can fall into sort of victim stories. That this is too much, the world is overwhelming, I wasn't born for this world. You will feel like you don't really fit. You don't really belong, and you certainly can feel quite misunderstood. You may have been taught to shut down your senses, even your spiritual senses. As a young one, you may have been talking to trees or angels or spirits, and it's very, very real for you, but that gets shut down and humiliated and shamed, and put down to just imagination. But in actual fact, if we look back historically at where we all come from, which is indigenous tribal life, there was always a shaman. There was always a shaman in a tribe, and they were a conduit to other spiritual dimensions. They walked between worlds. They were not put down. They were absolutely revered, actually, and valued for their awareness, their perception, their ability to be prophetic, visionaries, and leaned on for their healing capacities. Okay, and they were a portal for healing. So, this was revered, certainly as history marched on. It has been drummed out of the West, if we can speak into a culture, the West with the burnings of the witches, etc. Anything intuitive, anything mystical was pretty much drummed out of us. We're now dealing with that intergenerational trauma, which is you need to be fearful if you do perceive and sense and experience differently. And we're now talking about that, and that's a good thing, because you can shut those senses down so that you can fit in and have a sense of belonging. But can you really? You know that you can't. It's always been there, it's always been with you. And there may be a time in your life, if you've had to shut them down, that you start to actually open up a little bit and let it back in. And that's a beautiful journey, and I would wish that for people, very much so. It's a reconnection with our true self, our soul, and also our mission and purpose in life. And you could call it spiritual guidance, divine guidance, or intuitive guidance, or guidance from your inner self. I don't care how you define it, but it is a beautiful place to be when you can actually hold space and reverence for truth coming through your system and owning it, even if the mainstream collective don't buy it and don't support you. Is actually moving into that place of healthy esteem, where you can say, well, you know what, it doesn't matter if the collective mainstream don't perceive what I'm perceiving. I just know it to be true for me. Okay? So I was talking about victim. We can feel like victims in a collapsed state with empathic overwhelm, and we can get caught in that storyline. And I would really like to encourage us and empower us to move away from that, because with the models and education I hope to share here with you about our multisensory psychology, you can actually find powerful ways to pivot out of that collapsed state. Okay. Simultaneously, on the other side of the spectrum, you're going to see me talking about spectrums a lot. We can overcompensate because we have been humiliated and shamed for being who we are, and so we puff our chests out and then off we go, and we are now special. So to have intuitive abilities or these types of perceptual capabilities doesn't make you special either. It just is what it is. Okay? You can see this manifesting in New Agey spiritual groups, etc. And we can fall into, I know better, and I'm a bit of a guru, and they're very good at what they do. They can mentally track how people are thinking and feeling and give them exactly what they need and speak into what the collective are desiring from them. Hence can have followers. But in actual fact, this isn't anything special. It just is what it is. Okay? So, not a victim, nor special. It's just what's true. And in terms of intuitive abilities, my darlings, intuitive abilities, everybody has the capacity to grow and strengthen their intuitive abilities. We're going to talk a lot more about intuition in the future. Or you could call it guidance and insight. So Everybody has the capacity. You just have it on high voltage. Okay, and you've had it from the get-go. So general population may be watching these videos and go, oh, I'm going to learn something from Kira, and that is correct. You will. This is a time in history, and it's an exciting time, but also a challenging time. Our spidey senses will be going off. Everybody's spidey senses right now are going off because we're sensing change in the air, which triggers in us uncertainty. And that becomes scary and terrorizing for a system. And then we can find ourselves in fight, flight, freeze, fix, all these sort of maladaptive stress responses that we learnt when we were younger. And the wounded parts of us like to come out. And we certainly saw that over the COVID period. We had a lot of wounded inner children expressing themselves through adult bodies. Point in case, the toilet paper debacle in supermarkets, for example. So we are sitting in a very interesting time in history. We all know it. Changes in the air, and it's happening very quickly. We have a very different lifestyle from those ancestors of ours that we stand on their shoulders. Thank you for all the comforts that they've brought us post-World War II. We are more into understanding our interior, our psychology. Therapy became popular in the 1960s and 70s in the US, and that spread across the West. And it's a part of our natural, organic evolution. So we're learning about a component of the intuitive system that we all have, which is our emotional guidance system. We're amateurs at it at this stage. In 10, 20, 30 years' time, we'll be a lot better at it. This is what I'm doing right now. I've got a baton and I'm going to pass it to the younger generations. But for highly attuned people, we really need to understand our emotional guidance system. And because you feel your feelings so deeply, we almost have an innate calling to do that deeper healing work in our interior, to understand our own psyche. And as I may have mentioned in the last video, we go into our own psychology using the tools of mindful awareness, the witness, to track thoughts, feelings, sensations. But I would go even further. Gestures, expressions, the way that we move, the energy that we feel in our body, the way that we're speaking. Now this becomes a cluster, and this helps us to track our patterns. The patterns that we just think are second nature to us but may be tripping us up. More on that later. These are our patterns. So marrying mindfulness training with psychology and what we call parts work, or Jung, thank you Jung, archetypal patterns, archetypal psychology, we are understanding basically a force or an instinctive urge that comes through us at certain times that we get triggered into, that helps us to understand, oh wow, there I go into my codependent. Oh, there I go into my rescuer. There I go into my avoidance. There I go into my pursuing. There I go into whatever force is racing through your body when you get triggered. And the more awareness we have of these patterns, the more we can take a breath and actually start to pivot into a pattern that's more aligned with the truth of who you are. And this is where the intuitive system comes in, because the intuitive system is about truth. What's your truth in the now moment? Okay, so more on that in the future, the intuitive system. But wanted to give you that backdrop of historically where we're sitting right now, the internet era. Oh my goodness, and how that's hooking us. It's hooking the emotional system that we all have. We used to say sex sells, now I would say that outrage sells. And what we have even in mainstream media news is a type of infotainment and clickbait strategies to hook your attention, and they hook you through recruiting your emotional system into emotions that are, quite frankly, addictive. So we're developing new addictions right now in these early stages of trying to understand our emotional system. That's the general population. Now, if you're highly attuned, all of this is going to be on steroids. So we need to have navigational tools to get around the internet, period. This is so important. Otherwise, we're going to be running down this rabbit hole, this rabbit hole, this rabbit hole. And we need to keep ourselves psychically safe. So we need good psychic hygiene to protect our system. Because once that system gets out of equilibrium, it's really challenging to understand the data coming in and therefore coming into alignment with truth. Okay? Your personal truth, because everyone's got their own personal journey and everyone's got their own mission. And one thing I didn't add was that some highly attuned people are plant whisperers, they're nature whisperers, they are animal whisperers. They're not so much into the humans, but they'll be in the environment. They'll be working with the animals. Okay. So a few other things to mention is that you'll find with highly attuned people, they prefer depth conversations over short talk. They are the person that people feel safe to talk to. As I mentioned in the previous video, there's a lot of wounded healers that we find who are highly attuned. They have a sacred wound or multiple sacred wounds. And these wounds teach us how to heal ourselves so we can help heal others, so that when people look us in the eye, they know that we've been there too. And that right there, my darlings, is actually medicine in and of itself. So I think that is about all I wanted to cover. Once again, I would say if there's any questions to what I've shared with you now, please pop them below, and that will help guide me as to what I need to continue to elaborate on. One thing I will say before I head off is that I gave an example of my beautiful mother in the previous video around anger, and I was picking up on her anger before she did. Anger is a wonderful emotion. It's a part of our emotional guidance system, and it's helping us to know who we are, what our values are, and the boundaries that we need to set to keep ourselves safe. So I wanted to clarify that we'll be talking more about the emotional system, but certainly didn't want to put my darling mother on the spot as someone that has anger. It was a beautiful thing that she had anger, just as it's a beautiful thing for all of us to feel anger. As long as we can work with it effectively, if we are addicted to things that elicit anger in our system, that may be detrimental. And that's why I've talked to you today about the internet era and taking really good care of your highly attuned system. Okay, so thank you once again for listening, and I hope that there has been something here that's been helpful and resonates. Take care and lots of love.